The paper felt cold in my hand, colder than the air conditioning I kept blasting in the office, trying to outrun the summer heat baking the city outside. It was a statement. A business credit card statement. Routine. Except this one wasn't. The numbers didn't align with the spreadsheets I knew like the back of my hand. My company, the one I'd built from a laptop on my kitchen table into a force in the market, had a rhythm, a predictable pulse of expenses. This was a frantic, alien beat. My finger traced the lines, each charge a small, sharp shock. Hardware stores. Lots of them. Multiple transactions, hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, spread across weeks. Paint. Flooring. Fixtures. Things I hadn't bought. Things my team hadn't bought. My stomach clenched. My first thought, the rational one, was fraud. Identity theft. A hacker. It had to be. The second thought, the one that snaked in from the dark corners of my mind, was his name. Mark. My husband. He had access. He handled some of the finances. Or he said he handled them. I mostly managed the operational side, the client acquisition, the strategy, the growth. He was supposed to be the rock, the partner handling the back end. The trust was implicit. Assumed. Like breathing. I sat there, the hum of the server room behind the wall suddenly feeling louder, more menacing. The city noise outside, usually a comforting backdrop, felt distant, unreal. My world was shrinking to the size of this single sheet of paper, and the growing dread pooling in my gut. It wasn't just one or two odd charges. It was a pattern, a deliberate, sustained bleeding of funds. My funds. My business's funds. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. My office, usually a sanctuary of focused energy and ambition, now felt like a cage. A cold sweat prickled my skin. I looked at the statement again, scanning the dates, the amounts, the vendor names. Home Depot. Lowe's. Sherwin-Williams. A litany of renovation supplies. But for what? We weren't renovating anything. My office was fine. Our house was fine. Where was this money going? And more terrifyingly, who was spending it? My mind, usually a sharp, efficient machine, felt sluggish, coated in a thick layer of disbelief.
Mark? No. Impossible.
He wouldn't. He couldn't. Not like this. Not using my business. The business that was our future. The business that was me. He was proud of it. He said he was. The silence in the office pressed in. It was late. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, leaving me alone with the glow of my monitor and the gnawing suspicion that was quickly becoming certainty. I pulled up the online banking portal. The statement was only a summary. The online details were granular. Address codes for the stores. Dates and times. My fingers trembled on the keyboard. Each click was a step deeper into a nightmare. The transactions stretched back months. Smaller at first, then growing bolder, larger. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. My vision blurred for a second. I rubbed my temples, trying to clear the fog, the rising panic. This wasn't just fraud. This was sabotage. This was deliberate. The city lights outside my window seemed to mock me, glittering like distant, uncaring eyes. I was sitting in the heart of the empire I'd built, watching it being eroded from the inside. By the one person I should have been able to trust with everything. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My life before that statement felt almost cartoonish in its simplicity now. A clean line. A clear path. I was in my late 30s, married to Mark for 5 years, together for 10. My business was my baby. Launched it 7 years ago. Bootstrapped it. Poured every ounce of energy, passion, and intelligence I had into it. It wasn't just a job, it was my identity. It was the proof of what I could do. We were comfortable. Not rich, but secure. Building towards something. A bigger house, maybe kids someday, definitely expanding the business, hiring more people, maybe opening a second location. Dreams built on the solid foundation of my hard work and what I thought was a partnership. Mark, he worked in a different field. Stable, but less ambitious than me. He was supportive. Or he seemed supportive. He'd listen when I talked about clients, about strategy, about the long hours. He'd bring me coffee. He'd tell me he was proud. It all felt normal.
Good even.
The kind of steady, quiet life you build together, brick by brick. That statement wasn't a brick. It was a wrecking ball. The next few days were a blur of cold, controlled investigation. I didn't confront him immediately. My gut told me silence was my only weapon right now. I needed information. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. I downloaded every statement. I cross-referenced dates. I looked up the addresses of the stores. They weren't near my office. They weren't near our house. They were in a different part of the city, a part one rarely went to. My mind was working on two tracks simultaneously. One was the pure, analytical business owner, meticulously tracking down discrepancies, identifying patterns of theft. The other was the wife, bleeding inside, trying to reconcile the numbers on the page with the man she shared her life with. The cognitive dissonance was a physical pain, a constant ache behind my eyes. I started noticing things I dismissed before. His late nights, always working, his phone always face down. His increasing secrecy. Little things that had just been static in the background of our life together suddenly sharpened into horrifying focus. They weren't random quirks. They were cover. I hired a private investigator, recommended by a lawyer I trusted implicitly, a sharp woman named Elena who specialized in complex financial fraud and, unfortunately, divorce. I didn't tell Elena everything yet, just that I suspected financial impropriety related to my business and needed discretion. The PI was a quiet man, former police. Efficient. Unseen. He worked fast. Faster than I could have on my own, paralyzed by shock and the need for secrecy. Within a week, he had the answer. The addresses matched a small commercial strip mall across town. He sent me photos. A storefront. Under renovation. Not empty, but clearly being built out. A sign was going up.
A name.
Bloom and Petal, a flower shop. My breath hitched. A flower shop?
Why?
Why would Mark be funding a flower shop renovation? It made zero sense. Unless. The PI's report continued, meticulously detailing surveillance. Mark wasn't just visiting the site. He was there frequently, meeting someone. A woman. Different woman in each photo, but clearly the same person.
Young.
Attractive. She was overseeing the work, taking deliveries, giving instructions. The report was clinically detached, but the photos screamed the truth. Mark wasn't just renovating a store. He was building it. For her. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. The hardware store charges. The renovation supplies. The location across town. The other woman. It wasn't fraud against me by a stranger.
It was betrayal by him.
Using my business to build a life, a business, with someone else. The pain was sudden and absolute. It felt like being physically cleaved in two. One half was the successful businesswoman, watching her empire's foundations crack. The other half was the woman who thought she was loved, discovering her marriage was a carefully constructed lie, a stage for his deceit. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. The numbers on the statements danced behind my eyes. The woman's face in the photos swam in my vision. Mark's face, the one I thought I knew, was now a mask I couldn't see behind. The trust was gone, evaporated, leaving a vast, empty chasm filled with ice and broken glass. I walked the floors of my house, the house we'd built together, and it felt alien. His presence, usually a comfort, now felt like a contamination. I saw his clothes in the closet, his toothbrush in the cup, and felt a wave of nausea. Every shared meal, every conversation, every touch felt tainted. A performance. A lie built on my blind faith. I couldn't eat. Couldn't focus on work, not really. I went through the motions, a ghost in my own life. My team noticed something was wrong, but I deflected, citing stress. The truth was too big, too ugly, to share. The legal battle began quietly. I contacted Elena again, this time laying out everything. The statements, the PI's report, the photos, the location. Elena was sharp, Her eyes narrowed as she listened, occasionally scribbling notes. There was no pity in her gaze, only professional assessment. It was exactly what I needed. Someone who saw the situation not as a personal tragedy, but as a complex legal problem to be solved. "This is more than just infidelity," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. "He's committed clear financial fraud using your corporate entity. That has significant implications, both legally and financially for your business. The good news, if there is any," she paused, "is that because the money originated from your business account, we have a strong claim to follow those funds." My mind was still grappling with the enormity of the betrayal, the sheer audacity, the callousness. Using my business credit, the business I'd sacrificed so much for, to build her dream. It was a violation on every level: professional, personal, spiritual. Elena laid out the options: confrontation, separation,
Divorce.
and the business side, tracing the funds, demanding restitution, potentially going after the assets created with those funds. The flower shop. The flower shop he built with my money for his mistress. The irony was a bitter, indigestible pill. "We need to move strategically," Elena advised. "If he knows you're onto him, he could try to hide assets, complicate things further. For now, act normal. Gather everything. Every statement. Every communication. Every piece of evidence." Acting normal felt like wearing a costume made of sandpaper. Every time I saw Mark, sat across from him at the dinner table, listened to him talk about his day, smiled when he smiled, I felt like a fraud myself. My skin crawled. Inside, I was a coiled spring, vibrating with a mixture of rage and cold, hard calculation. The pain was still there, a deep, constant ache, but it was starting to crystallize into something else. Something sharp. Something dangerous. The financial pressure on my business was building. The irregular charges were draining my operating capital faster than planned. Suppliers were getting paid late. It wasn't enough to cripple me yet, but it was a steady bleed, a constant reminder of the parasite I was living with. My business was suffering because of his lies and her flower shop. That was the final straw. The injury wasn't just personal anymore. It was an attack on the very core of who I was, on the future I was building. The fear started to set in. What if this destroyed everything? What if the legal costs, the drained funds, the emotional toll, sunk my business? It wasn't just my livelihood, it was my identity. If I lost the business, what was left? A woman betrayed, financially ruined, standing amidst the wreckage of her life. That fear was a powerful accelerant. It burned away the last vestiges of denial, of hoping it was a misunderstanding, of wishing things could go back to normal. Normal was gone. It wasn't coming back. My only path was forward, through the fire. I stopped seeing Mark as my husband. He became the adversary, the obstacle, the thief who was trying to steal my future. My focus narrowed. The pain receded, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wouldn't just survive this. I would fight back. And I wouldn't just fight him. I would dismantle the life he was building with my resources, brick by painful brick. The flower shop became my target, the symbol of his betrayal, the monument to his deceit, paid for with my sweat and tears. I wanted to see it crumble. I needed to see it crumble. Not out of petty revenge, not entirely, but because it represented the tangible damage he had done to my business, the direct siphoning of my funds into his mistress's venture. It was a clear link, a paper trail made of paint and lumber and floral displays. Elena and I worked in absolute secrecy. We built the case file. We documented every charge, tracing it from my business account to the hardware stores, linking the dates to the PI's surveillance photos showing deliveries and construction at the flower shop address. We gathered evidence of his connection to the woman. Her name, her lease agreement for the space. Everything. The strategy solidified. We would go after the funds. We would argue that the assets purchased with those funds, the renovations, the inventory, the equipment for the flower shop, were essentially stolen property belonging to my business. This wasn't just about divorce and personal damages. This was business fraud. Corporate theft. The stakes felt impossibly high. My entire future rested on the strength of this case, on my ability to prove his deliberate deception and financial malfeasance. If I failed, the debt remained tied to my business, potentially crippling it, while he and his mistress walked away with a new venture built on my back. I started spending evenings and weekends not commiserating or crying, but working. Not on my business, but on his unraveling. I learned about commercial leases. I studied property records. I worked with forensic accountants Elena recommended, tracing the money trail with ruthless precision. My office felt less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. Maps spread out, timelines tacked to the wall, highlighted printouts of bank statements like tactical intelligence reports. Mark remained oblivious. Or perhaps he was too arrogant to imagine I would ever discover, let alone act on, the depth of his deceit. He continued his late nights, his carefully constructed lies. He even complained about my stress, my preoccupation, asking if work was getting to me. Each instance was a fresh twist of the knife, a confirmation of his utter lack of conscience, his profound underestimation of me. This quiet, meticulous work was the turning point. It wasn't a sudden dramatic decision, but a steady hardening of my resolve. The pain was transmuted into power, the fear into fuel. I wasn't just defending myself. I was going on the offensive. I wasn't just protecting my business. I was reclaiming my power, my agency, my worth. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I was the owner of a highly successful business under attack, and I was going to defend it with every tool at my disposal. Legally,
Strategically.
relentlessly. The flower shop, the physical manifestation of his betrayal, would be the first domino to fall. The plan was put into motion. Elena filed the necessary legal documents, a civil suit alleging corporate fraud and theft, naming Mark and, crucially, the mistress as beneficiaries of the stolen funds. We also filed for an emergency injunction and asset seizure specifically targeting the flower shop, arguing that the business was built using fraudulently obtained funds from my company. The legal process moved swiftly, propelled by the clear paper trail we had meticulously constructed. The charges from my business account were undeniable. The link to the renovation supplies for that specific address was irrefutable. The PI's evidence solidified the connection between Mark, the mistress, and the ongoing construction. The day came. The day I had been planning, calculating, steeling myself for. It wasn't a dramatic showdown in a courtroom. It was colder, more clinical, more devastating in its execution. Elena, accompanied by a bailiff and a representative from the court-appointed receiver, arrived at the flower shop. I wasn't there physically, but I was on the phone with Elena, listening, picturing the scene I'd imagined countless times. The shop was almost ready to open. Inventory was in. Flowers were being arranged. The mistress was there, busy, buzzing with apparent excitement. Her dream, built on my foundation of betrayal. Elena walked in, calm and professional, and served the papers. The injunction, the asset seizure, the notice that the business, built with my stolen funds, was being shut down immediately, its assets seized as partial restitution. From Elena's detached description over the phone, I could hear the mistress's confusion, then disbelief, then mounting panic. She stammered. She argued. She claimed she didn't understand. Where was Mark? She tried to call him. That's when he arrived. Drawn by her frantic calls, walking into the scene he never in a million years expected to see. His face, I imagined, going from annoyed concern to utter shock. The bailiff, the receiver, the official documents. Elena, standing there like an avenging angel of corporate law. He started yelling, shouting. Not at Elena, not at the officials. At her. How could this happen? What did she do? He was trying to distance himself, to pretend he wasn't involved, wasn't responsible. He hadn't expected me to find out. He hadn't expected me to connect the dots. He hadn't expected me to fight back, not like this. Not by attacking the very thing he was building. He finally looked at Elena, demanding to know what this was. And Elena, in her calm, clear voice, explained. The lawsuit. The fraud. the stolen funds, the seizure of assets, all originating from my business. Then he turned his rage on me. Even though I wasn't there, I could hear it through the phone, crackling with fury, disbelief, and raw, exposed guilt. He screamed my name. How could I? How dare I? This was crazy. I couldn't do this. Did I know what I was doing? I was ruining everything. He was yelling about his ruin, his plans being destroyed. Not a word about the betrayal, the theft, the violation of my trust and my business. His only concern was that his carefully constructed lie had imploded in his face. He screamed about her, about the shop, about the debt I was supposedly hanging around his neck. He screamed that I was being hysterical, that I was overreacting, that this was all my fault. The raw, unadulterated entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. He had stolen from me, systematically for months, to build a new life with another woman, using the very foundation of my hard work, and when I caught him and fought back legally, he screamed that I was the one ruining things. His screaming went on, a torrent of blame and denial. It wasn't the roar of a cornered lion. It was the frantic squeal of a pig caught in the fence. He hadn't just been blindsided. He had been utterly unprepared for the cold, calculated force of a woman defending her life's work. Elena held the phone slightly away from her ear, letting his tirade wash over her. I listened, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from a grim, satisfying finality. This was it. The culmination of months of silent pain and meticulous planning. He thought he had won, that he was untouchable, that he could take from me with impunity. He was wrong. The mistress was crying now, realizing her dream wasn't just over. It was being legally dismantled before her eyes, the very floorboards she stood on claimed as restitution for my loss. Mark's screaming continued, a broken record of outrage and self-pity. He paced, he gesticulated wildly, attracting attention from other businesses in the strip mall. His carefully constructed facade of normalcy, of quiet support, had shattered, revealing the entitled, deceitful man beneath. Elena calmly interjected, "Mark, your wife has presented irrefutable evidence of corporate fraud. The court has deemed her claim valid. These assets are being seized. You will have your day in court regarding the civil suit for damages. I strongly advise you to contact your own legal counsel immediately." His face, even filtered through Elena's calm description, must have been a mask of disbelief. He hadn't hired a lawyer. He hadn't prepared. He thought he was just having an affair and siphoning off some cash, something he could smooth over or deny if ever caught. He hadn't envisioned a scenario where his actions were treated as serious corporate crime, resulting in the immediate seizure of the very asset he had created through his deceit. The screaming eventually subsided into sputtering rage and futile threats. The bailiff and receiver began their work, documenting the inventory, changing the locks. The flower shop, the symbol of my betrayal, was effectively shut down, a tombstone erected on the grave of his elaborate lie. It wasn't just karma, it was leverage. I hadn't just discovered his crime. I had used the evidence of the crime itself to seize the proceeds. He hadn't just been caught, his ill-gotten gains were being confiscated because of how he stole them from my business. The very mechanism of his betrayal became the instrument of his downfall. The legal battle that followed was arduous, draining, but ultimately, a validation. Elena was brilliant. She systematically presented the evidence, dismantling his flimsy defenses. He tried to claim I was aware of the spending, that it was a joint investment, a misunderstanding. But the paper trail didn't lie. The dates, the vendors, the destination of the funds, all pointed back to the flower shop renovation and his mistress. He had no credible defense. He had no legitimate explanation for using my business credit card for expenses completely unrelated to my business operations, funneling that money into a separate venture managed by another woman. The court saw it for what it was: corporate fraud, theft, and a breach of fiduciary duty, both to my business as an authorized user and implicitly to me as his wife and the sole owner. The court ruled in my favor. They awarded significant damages, not just the value of the seized assets, the flower shop inventory and fixtures, but additional restitution for the financial strain placed on my business, the legal fees, and punitive damages for the malicious nature of his actions. The exact amount was substantial, more than just the money he'd stolen. It was a judgment that would follow him, a legal albatross around his neck for years. He was financially ruined. The flower shop was gone. The mistress, from what I heard through the grapevine and Elena's discreet channels, quickly distanced herself when the financial reality and legal ramifications hit home. His own career suffered from the scandal and the legal judgment. His screaming in the flower shop that day was the sound of his world collapsing, built on a foundation of sand and lies. The divorce was finalized. Cleanly, quickly, because the financial settlement was tied to the civil fraud case. He got nothing from me. He owed me dearly. Standing in my office after it was all over, looking out at the city lights that no longer felt alien, the silence was different. It wasn't heavy with dread. It was quiet, peaceful almost. My business was safe. Bruised, yes, financially strained from the legal fight, but intact. Stronger in a way. I had defended it. I had defended myself. The emotional scars remained, deep and ragged. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial loss. Trust, once broken, is a difficult thing to rebuild, especially when the person who shattered it was the one closest to you. There was no triumphant gloating, no feeling of pure, unadulterated victory. It was more complex, a deep, weary satisfaction that justice, of a kind, had been served. A profound sadness for the loss of a future I had believed in, a partnership I thought was real, and a quiet strength that came from facing the worst kind of deceit and not just surviving, but prevailing. I learned a harsh lesson about vulnerability, about the dangers of blind trust, even with those you love. My business, my creation had been attacked, and my marriage had been the Trojan horse. But I had learned to fight. I had learned to be cold, strategic, and relentless when necessary. The flower shop space remained empty for a while, a constant reminder. Then, eventually, a new business moved in. Something unrelated. Life moved on. And so did I. My business thrived. The initial financial setback was temporary. We recovered, we grew. The experience, brutal as it was, had forced me to scrutinize everything, to build stronger safeguards, to rely even more fiercely on my own judgment and the trusted few around me. Sometimes, late at night in the office, when the city outside is quiet, I think about that statement, that single sheet of paper that ripped my world open. I think about the screaming. His screaming, not mine. The sound of his carefully constructed lie collapsing. And I know that while the scars are permanent, they are also proof. Proof that I was broken, yes, but I was also strong enough to put myself back together, piece by piece, and build something even more resilient on the ruins. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life. Thanks for being here.